Hello and welcome. You're watching Beyond World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look as to what is making headlines at this hour. A report citing the Iranian rights NGO that is apparently based out of America says that at least about 45 protesters have now been killed since the start of the protests in Iran. This is the unrest in Iran is now in its 12th day amidst the deteriorating economy. And Russia dubs Ukraine and European backers as the axis of war and slams the militaristic statements and renews its warning that it will consider the presence of any foreign troops in Ukraine to be a legitimate military target. Ukrainian officials are racing to try and restore power after Russian strikes plunged two southeastern regions, including Dnipro, into complete darkness, forcing critical infrastructure to now rely on reserves. Protesters demonstrate against the killing of a woman by an immigration officer in the U.S. Midwestern city of Minneapolis and clash with the law enforcement agents as anger continues to mount in the aftermath of this fatal shooting. The Israeli forces have killed at least 4 more Palestinians in 2 separate bombings in the Gaza Strip. This hours after the Israelis claimed that they hit what they describe as a failed militant rocket launch. In the unfolding drama in West Bengal, the Enforcement Directorate has approached the High Court alleging that Mamata Banerjee has walked out with a laptop, phone and also with multiple documents in the house of the chief of the election consultant of IPAC during a raid by the probe agency. And Colombia's leftist president Gustavo Petro agrees with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump to take joint action against cocaine smuggling guerrillas on the border with Venezuela. Syrian security forces have been deployed amidst gunfire as civilians flee the Kurdish majority neighborhoods in Aleppo. This even as clashes between the government forces and the Kurdish-led fighters continue to escalate.
בוקר טוב עם ישראל, בוקר טוב. אני ראיתי פוסט, שלח לי חבר הבוקר וגם נפגשתי איתו בפייסבוק הבוקר על הערבי שרשם בעצם כמה אנחנו היהודים בארץ ישראל חיים כאן בזכותכם הערבים כביכול. אז לא, יש לך טעות גדולה. אתה רוצה בדק לחק אולי בדק אחוהו. נחכי לך על אחוהו אולי על חק. אז אני אספר לך על החק. לחק مسجل عند اليهود بالتوراة بالنبي بالنبي عاموس ילחמו אליך ולא יאכלו לך. אצלנו כתוב בנביא ילחמו אליך ולא יאכלו לך. לכן אתם הערבים עם כל הטמטום של היהודים אצלנו שנתנו לכם תעודת זהות והכניסו אתכם לליבנו ולקרבנו ולתת לכם את כל העדפה המתקנת, אני רוצה להגיד לכם מכל הלב, ערבים ישראלים, ואני יודע שיש ממכם טובים שרוצים לחיות במדינה ומזדעזעים מזה שאנשים עושים טרור ולא מכבדים את המדינה, אני יודע את זה, ותיקחו בחשבון שאני מדבר אליכם מהלב, שימו דגל על ביתכם, הצהירו אמונים למדינת ישראל, אנחנו נמצאים בעת בירור. מה זאת אומרת בעת בירור? בעוד זמן תיפתח מלחמה על הארץ, והערבים שנושאים תעודת זהות ישראלית, כנראה לפי כל מה שאנחנו רואים עם הפיגועים וההצהרות שלהם וההלך רוח שאנחנו רואים בחברה הישראלית, הם יקומו עלינו לכלותנו. אבל יש לכם טעות. תיקחו בחשבון שאתם עומדים להרוס ועומד להיות מפה הגירה. לא יעניין אותנו לא תעודת זהות ישראלית ולא יעניין אותנו לא תעודת זהות כחולה. עוד מעט כולם יקבלו הגירה מכאן. ואני אוכיח לכם את זה. אנחנו תפסנו 90 מיליון בן אדם, מדינה תפסנו אותה ככה, רק בגלל שהשמאל, אני מדבר על איראן, רק בגלל שהשמאל תופס ואוחז אותנו במבושנו ככה, אנחנו לא מבצעים את מה שאנחנו צריכים לבצע על הארץ. זה הניקיון שלכם, כמו שהתורה שלנו אומרת לנו, ולא תותירו מהם, וגם לא אפילו לחתום איתכם הסכם שלום, כי אנחנו רואים מה עשה הסכם שלום. במשך 30 שנה כמה יהודים נשחטו בשביל ההסכם השלום המטומטמים שלכם. לכן, ערבים, תבינו דבר אחד, אתם תכננים את אליום אל איימה, אנחנו יודעים את זה ומבינים את זה ומריחים את זה, ואל תחשבו שאתם תתפסו אותנו עם המכנסיים למטה, אנחנו מוכנים עליכם בכל הגזרות. ולדולת אל-ערב, אלא ואחד בדו יחוט רג'לו הון, بكلكم من هون اليهودي ولا كتين ولا عكيد ولا إشي جايز عليكم نووي من الصغير لكبير نحرقكم بدولتكم ولا واحد ياخد القدس. 3 الطريق جايين على القدس، 3 الطريق اليهود والمسيحيين والمسلمين. المسلمين بيقولوا احنا ناخدكم للقدس، المسيحيين ما بيقولوا هيك، ما بيقولوا هيك، هم كانوا هيك 2000 سنة، هم بيدفعوا لكم مصاري عشان تسووا الإرهابية. 100 سنة هم بيدفعكم مصاري عشان تسووا الإرهابية لليهود. לא ילך לכם. לא ילך לכם. מהשביעי לעשירי הייתה פה הזדמנות שלכם לשחוט את כולם. הקדוש ברוך הוא הורס לכם את כל התוכניות, ואנחנו הולכים לבנות בית מקדש בירושלים, ואנחנו ננקה בעזרת השם את הארץ מכל האויבים, ומי שישים דגל ישראל ויקבל את מרותה של מדינת ישראל, ברוך הבא עלינו, אנחנו נכבד אותך ואנחנו נלחם בשבילך. אני שמתי את הנשמה שלי בשביל להוציא את סמיך סווידן מתוך הסמטה, לא עשיתי חשבון אם הוא מוסלמי ואם הוא דרוזי ואם הוא צ'רקסי. מי שיהיה איתי את הנשמה אני אתן לו, מי שילחם איתי אני אלחם.
Report from U-Haul shows that more people moved out of California in 2025 than any other state. Max Gordon joins us. Okay, Max, you've got the U-Haul. Where are people going?
Hey, Stu. Well, the folks here at U-Haul say that affordability is one of the main reasons that Californians are packing up U-Hauls like this and hitting the road. And we asked the people at U-Haul, where are all the drivers going? Take a listen.
They're moving to more of the neighboring cities, states like Arizona, Nevada, Oregon. That's kind of where they're moving to. And when it's time to buy a house and you want to purchase something for your family, you want to look at what you are able to afford and what's meaningful.
The top states where U-Haul is seeing the most one-way traffic in includes Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, and South Carolina. This is the 7th time Texas has been the #1 growth state in the past 10 years. The states at the bottom for growth, where U-Haul is seeing the most movers leaving, include Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and then at the very bottom, California. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson using the ranking to take a jab at California's high income taxes. California Governor Gavin Newsom hitting back with a link to a U.S. News and World Report survey that lists Johnson's home state of Louisiana as the last for best states, telling the speaker to fix your own damn state. According to the State Department of Finance, California has experienced negative net domestic migration for more than 20 years. Still, California's population did grow by 0.05% in the last fiscal year, due in part to international immigration, a slowing of domestic outmigration, and natural increases due to births. It's the 3rd year in a row California's population has grown. U-Haul says there's been significant blue to red state migration. 7 of the top 10 growth states feature Republican governors, and 9 of the top 10 growth states went red in the last presidential election. On the other hand, 9 of the bottom 10 growth states feature Democratic governors, and some of them went blue in the last presidential election. And in compiling all this data, U-Haul looked at 2.5 million one-way trips. And I tell you what, Stu, even though I'm not moving right now, all this talk of driving a moving man makes me want to hit the road. Back to you.
Crowds gathered across the nation after a woman was shot and killed in Minneapolis. by a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer. 37-year-old Renee Nicole Macklin Good was a U.S. citizen born in Colorado and a mother of 3. In social media accounts, she described herself as a poet, writer, wife, and mom. Hours after the shooting, hundreds gathered for a protest and vigil nearby. Trump administration officials painted Macklin Good as a domestic terrorist who had attempted to ram federal officials with her vehicle.
This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm.
Her mother told a Minnesota newspaper her daughter was not involved in protests against the administration's immigration crackdown. She said her daughter was compassionate and took care of others all her life. And her ex-husband has said she just moved to the area from Kansas City, Missouri last year. He did not want to be identified, but said she had just dropped off her 6-year-old son at school and was driving home with her current partner when they encountered ICE agents.
We should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. We are not a business. We are a people. We are people with our own country and culture, language. We are not a product. So I think people should really think about that. I know Donald Trump is a businessman, but Greenland is not a product. We're a people. And that should be taken very seriously and that should be respected.
We should be the people that is in focus here. And when the Greenlandic people have shown time and again that we want independence, we should explore the possibilities for independence in our current situation.
Well, I would say I'm worried. It's been talking about that, what are we going to do if something happens? Should I need to go to Denmark to the children? Should I stay here? Stuff like that. So it's getting very practical thoughts about what's going to happen if something worse happens.
Warships from China and Iran have arrived in Cape Town ahead of a joint military drill hosted by South Africa. Named Will for Peace 2026, the drill brings together key nations from the BRICS Plus group. Russian ships are also expected to reach Cape Town. China will lead the week-long naval exercise starting Friday. South Africa's Department of Defense said the drill will showcase the participants' commitment to safeguard maritime trade routes and deepen cooperation in support of peaceful maritime security. But the initiative also risks further straining relations between South Africa and the United States after months of growing tensions between the two countries.
Moving on, let's shift our focus now to France, where farmers are back on the streets of the French capital and their protest is against the long-drawn Mercosur deal, a Europe-Latin America agreement that French farmers say will ruin their livelihood. In fact, just a short while back, farmers heckled the French National Assembly speaker, who said that a meeting is scheduled to be held with union representatives to hear their concerns.
Démission, 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 démission. La honte des Français, montrez que vous avez du poids, madame. À l'unanimité, les députés, ils ont voté contre le Mercosur. Montrez que vous avez du pouvoir. Nous, on compte sur vous, madame.
Farmers are protesting at several landmarks across Paris. This gathering is in front of the iconic Arc de Triomphe, where hundreds from the agrarian sector gathered to demonstrate against European Union's decision to go ahead with the Mercosur deal.
Cereal farming has been in crisis for 7 or 8 years now. We're competing with Ukrainian wheat, which isn't priced the same as ours. When Ukrainian wheat arrives in France at 120 euros, we would have to sell at 120 euros as well just to stay competitive and make a living. We don't have the same social and environmental costs as the Ukrainians.
There were similar such gatherings at the Eiffel Tower, where farmers and critics of the agreement with Latin America are rallying to exert more pressure on France's government. The country is already apprehensive of the deal and has relayed its concern to the European Union. In western Paris, farmers arrived with their tractors to join a coordinated protest, but law enforcement blocked their tractors. The EU-Mercosur deal has been 25 years in the making. The trade pact with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay would be the EU's largest in terms of tariff cuts. Germany, Spain and the Nordic countries say it will boost exports hit by American tariffs and reduce reliance on China by securing access to minerals. But critics, including France and Italy, fear an influx of cheap commodities that could hurt European farmers, which is what hundreds are still protesting about. And let me go across to Ross Cullen. He's joining us live on the broadcast from Paris, getting us the latest from there. Ross, concerning times, the farmers are back on the streets of Paris in this cold weather. What are they saying? Just a short while back, we saw that there was a scuffle as well between the farmers and the National Assembly Speaker.
Yes, you could hear démission, démission there, the calls for the resignation of different ministers. We know there's going to be a meeting this afternoon between representatives from the agriculture unions and top politicians to try to come to an agreement. Agriculture ministers across the EU met on Wednesday, where they said they agreed new incentives for the farming sector to try to reassure them, because there is going to be a crucial vote on Friday in Brussels to see if this deal between the European Union and Mercosur can be agreed or not. We know that when they tried to get it through in December, the EU failed because France, Italy, Hungary, Poland and Austria were holdouts. We know that the makeup of the countries that are concerned about this deal hasn't changed significantly, but it is believed that there might now be a greater chance of being able to pass this commercial accord. The EU says that it would be able to remove almost all of the duties on all products coming into the bloc and going to Mercosur countries as well. But French farmers fear a flood of cheap meat from Argentina and Brazil coming into the country, and they are also separately concerned and protesting about what they say was a botched response by the French government to an outbreak of lumpy skin disease in some cattle herds last year.
All right, so we'll have to wait and watch what happens on Friday. Thank you very much, Ross Cullen, for joining us and getting us the latest from Paris.
Minneapolis, chaos, death, and a nationwide divide. Well, a 37-year-old woman is dead. Her name is Renee Nicole Good. The place, a quiet residential street in Minneapolis, just a mile from where George Floyd, he was killed in 2020, a moment that shook the entire nation. But this time, it's immigration enforcement at the center. And the storm, well, it is raging. You're watching Times XP. It's me, Dhriti Artsri, narrating you what really happened here. On Wednesday, during a massive federal IC operation, officers were carrying out arrests across Minneapolis and St. Paul with more than 2,000 officers deployed. Renee Good was shot by an IC agent. Officials claim that she ran over an officer with her car. They say that the officer acted in self-defense. What a joke. In the meantime, President Donald Trump, he immediately defended the officer, saying that Renee violently, willfully and very viciously ran over the IC agent. Let me quote what Trump said. "This is a horrible thing to watch." The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator. IC agents, they are just trying to do the job of making America safe again. We need to protect our law enforcement officers from the radical left movement of violence and hate. In the meantime, Homeland Security weighed in. Secretary Kristi Noem, well, that person made the incident an act of domestic terrorism against IC personnel. Can you imagine that? She said that the officer had no choice. Let me quote what she said. "The woman attempted to run over federal agents and rammed them with her vehicle, leaving the officer with little choice but to open fire." Well, she also confirms that hundreds of arrests had taken place as part of the ongoing crackdown. But Minneapolis leaders, they are very angry. Their mayor, Jacob Frey, rejected the federal narrative completely. He said that they are already trying to spin this as self-defense. Having seen the video myself, that is just not acceptable. Frey demanded IC agent leave the city immediately, saying that they are ripping families apart. They are sowing chaos on our streets and in this case, literally killing people. Well, the city erupted in protests. Crowds gathered at the shooting site, chanting "Shame, shame, shame" and ICE out of Minnesota. Well, the tragedy, it has put a spotlight on ICE procedures, national immigration policies, and growing tensions between federal enforcement and city authorities. Well, now this is the fifth death that is linked to immigration enforcement since 2024, showing just how high the stakes have become. But you know why this matters? Because this isn't just about one woman or one ICE operation. It's about a city, a country, and a nation divided. Minneapolis is reeling trauma from George Floyd, questioning how law enforcement operates on its streets. In the meantime, Trump and federal governments are defending the aggressive immigration policies, framing officers as heroes under attack. And everyday Americans, well, they are watching, they are debating, taking sides. Some seeing the IC officer as just doing his jobs, others seeing a system that kills the vulnerable. In the end, this is the bigger picture. Immigration enforcement is escalating in the US cities. Federal operations are getting bigger, more aggressive, and more deadly. This is a warning. When enforcement meets anger, fear, and political polarization, the streets can erupt. Families are torn apart and lives, they are lost in seconds. Minneapolis has now become the center of national debate over ICE, immigration, and the role of federal power in the city streets. And the tension is far from over.
On this show, we often tell you about European hypocrisy, about how they lecture others and tell others to not do certain things while doing the same things themselves. And tonight we have another example. For the past few years, Europe has been lecturing India over Russian oil. It has accused India of funding Vladimir Putin's war. But guess who is actually funding the war? The Europeans themselves, in cold, hard cash. Look at the latest numbers. These are from 2025. In the last year, Russia earned an estimated $8.4 billion from energy exports to Europe. $8.4 billion. Russia exported LNG to Europe. LNG is liquefied natural gas. It is natural gas that is cooled down until it turns into a liquid. That makes it easy to transport. And Europe gets a vast majority of its LNG from Russia. In 2022, when the Ukraine war broke out, Europe promised to ban it. They promised to stop buying Russian LNG. But that promise never saw the light of day. And the imports continued. In 2025, more than 15 million tons of LNG reached European terminals. 15 million tons. This gas came from a joint venture called Yamal LNG. Its majority stake is held by a Russian company called Novatek. The rest is spread globally. France's Total Energy has a stake, so does China's gas giant CNPC. In 2024, Europe's share of shipments from Yamal was around 75%, and in 2025, it went up to 76.1%. Among European nations, France was the biggest importer. So long story short, Europe is importing more gas from Russia, and it's a loophole that has been deliberately made and exploited. You see, Europe has not banned Russian LNG. They have talked about it. They have promised to phase it out by 2027, but they have not banned it. And just days ago, the European Parliament voted on this issue.
And now we move on to the report by the Honorable Vaidere Ninisto on the gradual phasing out of Russian natural gas imports. The vote is closed and approved.
So a lot of talk over the past 4 years, but no action yet. Meanwhile, the imports just keep going up. And it won't change in a hurry because Eastern and Central Europe are still heavily dependent on Russian LNG. The EU is the top buyer of Russian liquefied natural gas. They make up a whopping 51% of the imports. China is 21% and Japan is 18%. Same with pipeline gas. The EU remains the top buyer with 37% share. China has 30% and Turkey has 27%. So even today, a big chunk of Russian energy ends up in Europe. But nobody bats an eyelid. Nobody accuses Europe of funding Putin's war. The truth is, Brussels has been double-faced. In public, they talk about crippling Russia's economy. They talk about ending energy imports, but they never do it. They sneakily carve out exemptions. Russian natural gas is not sanctioned. Why? Because Europe cannot live without it. Same with crude oil. European companies cannot import via sea, but they can import through pipelines. No logic, just casual hypocrisy. Another example is refined crude products. The EU has decided to ban them, but some of their partners are exempt from this ban, like Canada, Switzerland, and the UK. There is a clear double standard here. Europe spends billions of dollars on Russian LNG. European ports handle more Yamal gas than Asia. Europe's icebreakers transport this Russian LNG. France is Moscow's biggest European gas customer. Total Energies is a key investor in Yamal. But who gets shamed for Russia's war? India. Who gets threatened with more and more tariffs? India. And who gets called a war funder? Again, it's India. And who gets a free pass? Europe. The same Europe that slams Russia for invading Ukraine, but releases anodyne statements when the US attacks another country and abducts their president. For decades, Europe appointed itself as the moral police of the world, virtue signaling other countries and preaching values and the rule of law, but today it stands exposed. It has no moral ground or credibility, and definitely no right to point fingers at India.
A moving car, a gunman leaning out, and within seconds, one of Iran's most powerful local security figures is dead. On January 7, 2026, Lieutenant Mahmoud Haqiqat, police station commander and former intelligence chief in Iranshar, was assassinated in broad daylight. The attack was a drive-by ambush caught clearly on video. The footage shows a white car traveling down a road when an assailant leans out of a moving vehicle and opens fire, shot after shot. The car veers off course, crashes, and disappears into a cloud of dust. But this assassination is not an isolated incident. It is unfolding against the backdrop of Iran's largest unrest in years. The current wave of protests began in late December 2025, triggered by a deepening economic collapse. Iran's currency has plummeted to around 1.4 to 1.5 million rial per US dollar. Inflation is soaring. Essential goods are in short supply. But economic anger quickly turned political. Demonstrations have now spread to more than 40 cities across Iran. Protesters are chanting "Death to the dictator," directly targeting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Others are calling for the return of the Shah and demanding Iran prioritize its own people over foreign conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon. Rights groups report between 25 and 36 protesters killed, with over 2,000 arrested. Security forces have used tear gas, batons, and in some cases, live ammunition. The violence has claimed lives on both sides, including members of the regime-aligned Basij militia. Symbolism has also taken center stage. Protesters have been seen tearing down Iran's Islamic Republic flag in Tehran, Barajdan, and Baba Haydar, sometimes removing the regime emblem while keeping the national colors. A clear message: rejection of the government, not the nation. For the Khamenei regime, the pressure is mounting. The protests have exposed deep economic mismanagement, corruption, and a system paralyzed under an aging leadership. Some analysts call this a potential tipping point. Others caution it has not yet reached the scale of the 2022 Mahsa Amini uprising. The government has promised economic fixes, but at the same time, the judiciary has warned of zero leniency for anyone accused of helping enemies of the state. Iranian officials are also pointing fingers outward, accusing the United States and Israel of using hybrid warfare to incite chaos. They cite strong statements from U.S. President Donald Trump and Israel's approval of a potential strike plan. But so far, there is no concrete evidence that foreign powers are directly orchestrating these protests. Analysts say the claims may be aimed at discrediting demonstrators and justifying a harder crackdown. The assassination of Lieutenant Mahmoud Haqiqat may be just one attack, but it signals something far bigger. Iran is entering a moment of high volatility, where economic desperation, political anger, and armed insurgency are now colliding.
Is Israel stepping into an issue that could be the spark for a wider war? During a tour of Western Negev, the Israeli Prime Minister has said that he will, quote-unquote, return the Negev to the state of Israel. And Netanyahu made those comments in context of governance and development, but then in a region historically shaped by disputes, politics, strategic military interests. Those words carry a lot of weight. Let's just play out the statement.
We are coming to return the Negev to the state of Israel. This means settlement on a scale we have never known before. It means arrangements for the Bedouin residents as well. But first and foremost, it means the restoration of law and order.
The Negev is not just a desert. It accounts for nearly 60% of Israel's land. Israel's first Prime Minister, remember, described control of the Negev as essential to the state's survival. A view still shared by Israel's security establishment bordering Egypt and close to Gaza, the region hosting major military bases and acting as Israel's southern buffer. The Red Sea port of Eilat also providing Israel with vital maritime access to the Indian Ocean and global trade routes. Negev has also been a strategically vital and contested region between Israel and Egypt due to its location on the border and its use in military operations. Whether it was during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the 1956 Suez Crisis, 1967 Six-Day War, or the 1973 Yom Kippur War. But the Negev is also home to the Bedouin tribe. Around 300,000 Arab Bedouins live there. Many in villages the Israeli state has refused to recognize since the country's creation in 1948. And their own identity is rather complex. Many identify themselves as Bedouin Israelis, while others see themselves as Palestinian citizens of Israel. Human rights groups saying decades of demolitions, land confiscations, lack of basic services by the Israeli establishment reportedly created a permanent state of tensions there. And during his visit to the region, Netanyahu described Negev as, quote-unquote, out of control with collapsing crime, arms smuggling, national security posing a threat.
The Negev is out of control. We will rein it in, and an important operation by the Israeli police has begun.
And then earlier today, the Israeli president convened an emergency meeting with heads of local authorities from the Negev region in southern Israel. The meeting was held to address the escalation of violence and crime in Arab society, with a particular focus on the situation in the Negev. Last year was the deadliest year for Arab citizens of Israel. More than 250 died over the course of 2025 reportedly, and just over a week into this year, at least 11 Arab citizens have died in violence-related incidents. So then, is the Israeli government trying to improve the security situation in Negev, or is there something else at play here entirely? We're asking that question because during Netanyahu's latest tenure as Prime Minister, Israel has often found itself embroiled in conflicts, especially at a time when Netanyahu is facing mass protests by the Israeli people, legal hurdles. The way things stand right now, Netanyahu's Negev push may promise order, but history suggests it could deliver something far more sinister. Is the United Nations dying in plain sight? Because the United States is once again stepping away from the very institutions meant to hold the international system together, raising fresh doubts about whether agencies like the United Nations still have a future. The Trump administration has announced withdrawal from dozens of international bodies, many of them linked directly to the United Nations. President Trump has signed an executive order suspending U.S. support for 66 international organizations, agencies, and commissions after a comprehensive review of American funding and participation. And the list includes the UN's Population Agency and the treaty framework that governs global climate negotiations, several other UN-affiliated panels dealing with climate change, labor, migration, development also face US withdrawal. The administration has labeled many of these institutions as ideologically driven, inefficient, or misaligned with American priorities. According to the Secretary of State, Washington considers these organizations redundant, poorly managed, wasteful, or compromised by special interests, further claiming that continued participation threatens US sovereignty, economic strength, national freedom. The UN climate chief has said the decision by the United States to withdraw from a global climate treaty would quote-unquote only harm the US economy, jobs and living standards, a colossal own goal in a way which will leave the US less secure and less prosperous. The pullback, though, does not stop with the United Nations. The administration is also exiting non-UN platforms such as the Partnership for Atlantic Cooperation, the Global Counter-Terrorism Forum. This decision coming at a time when US foreign policy has already unsettled allies and rivals, with the capture of the Venezuelan leader and America weighing options to take over Greenland. We just told you about that. The Trump administration has already suspended or withdrawn support from the World Health Organization, the UN Human Rights Council, UNESCO, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Not just that, it also shifted to a selective pick-and-choose approach to paying UN dues, funding only operations that allegedly align with Trump's agenda. America has formally exited the Paris Climate Agreement once again after Trump returned to power last year, remember. It also moved to withdraw from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the foundational treaty behind global climate action. And the consequences are already visible. UN agencies and partner organizations have started cutting staff and scaling back programs. Several independent humanitarian groups reporting project closures following deep reductions in US foreign assistance, including funding through USAID. Experts warn that without US participation, global efforts to address issues like climate change and other transnational crises could slow dramatically. As Washington steps away, the question is only growing louder. Can the United Nations survive when one of its most influential members, the United States, walks out?